With only hours left before his execution, a feared Mafia boss didn't ask for absolution, a final cigar, or a message to his empire. He asked to see a waitress, a woman no one had heard of, with no ties to his world. But what happened when she stepped into that prison yard would freeze every guard in place, force the warden to halt the execution, and expose a truth that had been buried in plain sight for over a year. That morning, the air inside the penitentiary felt heavier, as if the very walls knew what was coming. Every sound, the shuffle of boots on concrete, the metallic clang of cell doors, the low murmur of voices carried a weight that pressed down on everyone inside. In his cell, Lucas Perry sat on the edge of his cot, hands loosely clasped, eyes fixed on the cold floor. He wasn't the ruthless kingpin the headlines had painted. Time and isolation had softened the hard edges, carved regret into the lines of his face. 7 years ago, he'd walked in defiant. Now, he just looked tired. The guards expected the usual last request. A steak dinner, a phone call to family, maybe a letter to his men still running operations on the outside. But when the warden asked, Lucas's voice was low, steady. "I want to see Elena Stone." A pause. Some guards exchanged glances. A condemned Mafia boss choosing a waitress over his empire. Unheard of. But for Lucas, Elena wasn't just some random woman. She was the only person who had looked at him like he was more than a headline, more than a monster. In his final hours, he didn't want forgiveness from strangers or absolution from priests. He just wanted to look into the eyes of someone who had never judged him. The warden leaned back, fingers steepled. He'd seen strange last requests, ice cream in February, a guitar no one played, a priest who never showed. But bringing a civilian, especially a woman with no criminal record, into a maximum security prison on execution day? Never. In the control room, officers debated. "It's a security risk," one said. "We've never allowed a civilian visitor this close to an execution." An older officer, quieter, spoke up. "She's all he's asking for. No visitors in 7 years. No letters. No one." He paused. "Maybe we should let him go in peace." The warden requested the file. Elena Stone, age 29, occupation, waitress, criminal record, none. No connection to organized crime. No ties to Lucas's empire. In the personal notes, subject worked at a diner Lucas frequented before his arrest. Background check cleared. After a long silence, the warden nodded. Under strict supervision. Visitation wing only. 10 minutes. Word spread fast. Some guards shook their heads. Others whispered about mob loyalty, hidden motives, possible escape plans. For Lucas, those 10 minutes were an eternity. Somewhere out there, Elena was on her way. And neither of them knew how much this moment would change everything. The visitation wing stood silent as the steel door at the far end buzzed open. Lucas sat in a metal chair, wrists cuffed loosely in front of him, eyes locked on the entrance. A dozen armed guards formed a barrier along the walls, tense, alert. Then he saw her. Elena stepped through the doorway, her movements slow, deliberate. She wore a simple gray sweater and jeans, her dark hair pulled back. 2 officers flanked her, but it was clear she was walking on her own, no coercion, no hesitation. Her eyes found Lucas's. For a moment, something flickered across her face recognition. Sorrow, fear. Lucas's breath caught. Years had passed, but nothing, the weariness in her eyes, the slight tremble in her hands, could disguise the woman he remembered. The one who used to refill his coffee without asking, who never treated him like a criminal even when the world did. The officers glanced at the warden. A single nod. Elena moved forward. Lucas rose slightly, despite his cuffs, and for a moment, the prison vanished. No countdown, no death order, just 2 people who once shared quiet moments in a diner that felt like another lifetime. But then something shifted. Elena's gaze swept across the line of guards and stopped. Her body went rigid, her eyes locked on a man standing near the back corner. Officer Calder, tall, stiff, hands clasped behind his back. Elena's expression changed. Fear, recognition, something sharp and instinctive. Calder looked away too fast. Guards shifted uneasily. Lucas felt it before he understood it, the tension in the air, the way Elena's hands trembled harder now, not from nerves but from something deeper. She wasn't here just to say goodbye. For the first time that morning, Lucas felt something stir inside him. Not resignation, not acceptance, curiosity. And in a place where every second counted, where truth had been buried under procedural certainty, instincts, especially a woman's, could mean everything. Elena stood there, silent, eyes still fixed on Calder. The guards didn't understand yet. Lucas didn't either. But somewhere in the quiet chaos of that visitation wing, a truth was beginning to surface, one that had been suffocating under fear for over a year. And if Elena had finally found the courage to walk through those steel doors, it meant she was ready to speak. The question was, would anyone be ready to listen? Elena's mind wasn't in the visitation wing anymore. It was back in the diner, back to the night everything changed. Before we dive, make sure you subscribe, like, and share this story. And tell me where in the world you're watching or listening from. Your messages connect us more than you know. Now let's begin. 1 year earlier, the Red Oak Diner sat on a forgotten corner of the city. The kind of place where the coffee was always hot, and the questions were few. Elena had worked the late shift for 3 years, serving truckers, insomniacs, and the occasional suited businessman who didn't want to be recognized. And then there was Lucas Perry. He started coming in around midnight, always alone, always taking the corner booth near the back exit. He never ordered much black coffee, sometimes toast. He read the paper, made quiet phone calls, and left cash tips that were too generous for what he ordered. At first, Elena was terrified. She knew who he was. Everyone did. The newspapers called him a ruthless crime lord, a man who built an empire on fear and blood. But the man who sat in her section didn't match the headlines. He said please and thank you. He never raised his voice. He asked her name the third time he came in, and he remembered it every time after. Long shift? He'd ask, when she refilled his cup. Always, she'd reply, managing a tired smile. He never pressed for conversation, never made her uncomfortable. In a world where men often leered or demanded her attention, Lucas Perry was kind, quietly, unexpectedly kind. One night, she dropped a tray of dishes near his booth. The crash echoed through the empty diner. She froze, bracing for irritation, maybe a complaint. Instead, Lucas had stood, helped her pick up the broken pieces, and said, "Happens to the best of us." She looked at him, then really looked, and saw something she hadn't expected. Weariness, loneliness, a man who carried weight no one else could see. After that, she stopped being afraid. But then came the night she wished she could forget. It was a Tuesday. The diner was nearly empty. Lucas had been there for over an hour, quieter than usual, staring at his coffee like it held answers he couldn't find. Around 1:30 a.m., he paid his bill, left his usual tip, and walked out the back door into the alley, something he did often to avoid being seen from the street. Elena was wiping down tables when she heard it. Shouting, muffled, urgent, then a sound that made her blood freeze, something heavy hitting the pavement. She moved toward the small window near the kitchen that overlooked the alley. Her hands shook as she pulled back the corner of the blinds. A man was running. Not Lucas, someone else. Tall, lean, wearing a dark jacket. He moved fast, disappearing into the shadows at the far end of the alley. Then she saw Lucas, standing near the dumpster, breathing hard, looking down at something, no, someone, on the ground. A body. Her breath caught. She stepped back from the window, heart hammering. Moments later, sirens wailed in the distance. Red and blue lights flooded the alley. Police swarmed the scene. Lucas didn't run. He just stood there, hands raised, as officers surrounded him. Elena watched from the shadows of the kitchen, invisible behind the glass. She saw them cuff him, saw them lead him away, saw the body bag being loaded into the coroner's van. And she saw the man who had run the real killer vanish into the night. The next morning, the headline screamed, Mafia boss arrested for murder. Elena sat in her apartment, staring at the paper, her hands trembling. She knew what she'd seen. She knew Lucas hadn't been alone in that alley. She knew someone else had been there, someone who had fled before the police arrived. But who would believe her? A waitress against the entire criminal justice system. A waitress who would be painting a target on her own back if she spoke. And worse, she'd recognize the man running. She hadn't been sure at first. The lighting was bad, the angle awkward, but the more she replayed it in her mind, the more certain she became. It was a cop, someone she'd seen in the diner before, someone who had come in with other officers, laughing, joking, acting like he owned the place. Officer Calder. The realization had paralyzed her. If she spoke, if she told anyone, they'd either dismiss her as a liar, or worse, silence her permanently. So she stayed quiet. She kept working her shifts. She avoided the news. She tried to forget the image of that man running into the dark, but the guilt never left. The present day. Elena blinked, pulled back into the present by the sound of boots shifting on concrete. Lucas was still watching her, his expression unreadable. The guards were too, their suspicion thickening the air. And Calder stood near the back, jaw tight, eyes darting toward the exit like a caged animal looking for escape. Elena's hands trembled, but she forced herself to step closer to Lucas. She had come this far. She couldn't turn back now. "Lucas," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. He leaned forward slightly, chains clinking. "Elena." Her throat tightened. She wanted to say everything at once, to tell him she was sorry, that she'd been a coward, that she should have spoken a year ago. But the words caught. One of the guards, a younger officer with sharp eyes, stepped forward. "Ma'am, if you have something to say, you need to say it now. Time's running out." Elena glanced at him, then back at Lucas. His eyes held hers, steady, patient, like he already knew she carried something heavy. She swallowed hard. "I never stopped thinking about that night." Lucas's expression shifted. Confusion, then realization. The room went still. Calder's hand twitched toward his belt. Another guard officer, Ramirez, the older one who had spoken up earlier, narrowed his eyes. "What night?" Elena's voice shook, but she pushed through. "The night Lucas was arrested. I was working at the diner. I saw." She hesitated, her gaze flickering toward Calder. "I saw what happened." The tension spiked. Ramirez took a step closer. "You were a witness?" Elena's breath hitched. "I didn't come forward. I was too scared." Lucas closed his eyes briefly. Not in anger, but in something closer to relief. Like a weight he'd been carrying alone, suddenly had someone else's hands beneath it. Calder's voice cut through the silence, sharp and defensive. "This is ridiculous. She's connected to him. She shouldn't even be here." Ramirez turned toward him, frowning. "Why are you so worked up, Calder?" "I'm not." Calder's jaw clenched. "I'm just saying, this smells like a setup." But his panic was showing. The other guards noticed. They exchanged glances. The warden, who had been observing from the side, stepped forward. His voice was calm but firm. "Miss Stone, what exactly did you see?" Elena looked at Lucas one more time. He gave the smallest nod, an unspoken permission, a quiet reassurance. She turned back to the warden, and for the first time in a year, she let the truth begin to surface. "I saw someone else in that alley. Someone who ran before the police arrived." The room held its breath, and in the back corner, Officer Calder's hand moved closer to his weapon. The warden's question hung in the air like a blade waiting to drop. Elena's lips parted, but before she could continue, Lucas spoke. "Elena." His voice was quiet but firm. "You don't have to do this." She turned to him, eyes glistening. "Yes, I do." For a moment, they just looked at each other, two people separated by chains and years of silence, connected by a truth neither had been able to escape. Lucas had expected anger when she walked through that door. Maybe accusations, maybe questions about why he'd asked for her, of all people, in his final hours. He'd expected her to demand answers, to confront him about the life he'd led, the reputation he carried. He hadn't expected this. She wasn't here to say goodbye. She was here to unburden herself. And that realization sent a chill through him. Elena took a shaky breath, her hands twisting together. I didn't come here out of sympathy, Lucas. I came because I've been living with something I should have said a year ago. Lucas leaned back slightly, processing. His mind raced through possibilities, through fragments of memory from that night. The shouting, the confrontation, the moment everything went wrong. What are you talking about? He asked, though part of him already knew. The night you were arrested, her voice cracked. I saw something. I saw someone. And she pressed her lips together, fighting the tremor in her jaw. I was too afraid to speak. The guards shifted. Ramirez stepped closer, his eyes moving between Elena and Lucas with renewed interest. The younger officer who had spoken earlier pulled out a notepad, suddenly alert. But it was Calder's reaction that set off alarm bells. He moved. Just a subtle shift, a half step back, positioning himself closer to the exit. His hand hovered near his belt, fingers twitching. His jaw was so tight it looked like it might crack. Elena's eyes flicked toward him, just for a second, but it was enough. Calder looked away, too fast, too deliberate. Lucas caught it. So did Ramirez. The warden, standing near the observation window, frowned. Miss Stone, are you saying you were a witness to the events of that night? I was working, Elena said, her voice barely holding steady. At the diner. Lucas had been there earlier. He left through the back, into the alley. I heard, shouting. I looked out the window, and I saw. She faltered. Lucas's chest tightened. He wanted to tell her to stop, to protect her from whatever fallout this confession would bring. But he also needed to hear what came next. I saw someone running, Elena continued, forcing the words out. Before the police came, someone else was there. The room erupted into murmurs. Guards exchanged glances, some skeptical, others intrigued. The warden raised a hand, silencing them. Why didn't you come forward? Elena's face crumpled slightly. Because I was terrified. I didn't know what I'd seen. I didn't know if anyone would believe me. And her voice dropped to a whisper. I was afraid of what would happen if I spoke. Lucas watched her carefully. The fear in her eyes wasn't abstract. It was specific, immediate. He glanced toward the line of guards. Most of them looked confused, curious. But one of them, Calder, looked like he was barely holding himself together. Lucas's mind clicked into place. The pieces assembled themselves with brutal clarity. She didn't just see someone. She recognized them. And whoever it was, they were in this room. The warden stepped closer, his tone measured but firm. Miss Stone, this is a serious allegation. If you have information relevant to this case, you need to provide details. Now, Elena nodded, tears spilling over. I know I should have said something sooner. She looked at Lucas, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry. Lucas shook his head slowly. Don't apologize to me. But you've been here for a year because I stayed silent. You stayed silent because you were scared, Lucas said, his voice low but steady. That's not a crime. Ramirez cleared his throat. Miss Stone, can you describe the person you saw? Elena hesitated. Her gaze drifted, almost involuntarily, toward the back of the room, toward Calder. Calder stiffened. His hand moved fully to his belt now, resting on the grip of his baton. His breathing was shallow, controlled, too controlled. The warden noticed. Officer Calder, is there a problem? No, sir. Calder's voice was clipped. This feels off. She's clearly connected to him. This could be a coordinated story. Coordinated? Ramirez's tone sharpened. She just admitted she's been silent for a year. How is that coordination? I'm just saying. Calder's voice rose slightly. We don't know what kind of relationship they had. For all we know, she's covering for him. Covering for him? Elena's voice cut through, sudden and sharp. He's been on death row for a year. How would that help him? Calder's jaw tightened. He didn't respond. The warden's eyes narrowed. Officer Calder, step forward. Sir, I don't think... Step forward. Reluctantly, Calder moved to the center of the room, his posture rigid. defensive. He avoided looking at Elena entirely. The warden studied him for a long moment. "Were you on duty the night of Lucas Perry's arrest?" A pause. "Too long." "I was nearby," Calder said finally. "Off duty." "I heard the call and responded." "That's not in your report," Ramirez said, flipping through a tablet. "I didn't think it was relevant." "You were at the scene of a murder and didn't think it was relevant?" Calder's face flushed. "I arrived after the arrest. I didn't see anything." Elena's hands clenched into fists. She was shaking now, but not from fear, from something closer to rage. Lucas watched her carefully. She was close to breaking, close to saying the thing that would shatter everything. "Elena," Lucas said quietly, "look at me." She did. "You came here for a reason," he said. "Whatever you need to say, say it. Don't hold back now." Her eyes filled with fresh tears, but beneath them was something harder. Resolve. She turned to the warden. "The man I saw running from the alley that night, I've seen him before. I recognized him." The warden leaned in. "Who was it?" Elena's gaze locked on Calder, and in that moment, the air in the room turned electric. Calder's hand moved toward his weapon, not the baton, the gun. Ramirez saw it. "Calder, don't." But Calder was already stepping back, eyes wild, cornered. Lucas rose from his chair despite the chains, instinct taking over. "Warden, get her out of here." The warden signaled to 2 officers. "Secure Officer Calder, now." Calder didn't resist, not yet, but his eyes burned with something dangerous. Elena stood frozen, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Lucas looked at her one last time, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them. "Thank you," he said, "for coming, for speaking." But his tone carried a warning she understood instantly. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. The room felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were closing in. Every eye was on Elena, waiting. She drew in a breath that seemed to take forever, her chest rising and falling with the weight of what she was about to say. The words had lived inside her for a year, locked away, suffocating, poisoning every quiet moment. Now, finally, they demanded to be spoken. "I saw someone run out the back door that night," Elena said, her voice trembling but clear. "And it wasn't Lucas." Silence. Then chaos. Guards erupted into whispers, heads turning toward each other, voices low but urgent. What did she just say? Another person? Why didn't this come out during the trial? The warden raised a hand, silencing them. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. "Miss Stone, you're saying there was another individual at the scene?" "Yes," Elena's voice cracked, but she didn't falter. "Lucas went into the alley. I heard shouting. Then I saw a man running fast, like he was fleeing. He disappeared into the shadows before the police arrived." Ramirez stepped closer, his notepad out. "And you're certain it wasn't Mr. Perry?" "I'm certain." Elena's hands were shaking so badly now, she had to clasp them together. "Lucas was still in the alley when the police showed up. He didn't run. He stayed." Lucas sat perfectly still, his eyes fixed on her. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, but something in his expression had shifted in intensity, a focus that hadn't been there before. And then his gaze moved, slowly, deliberately. It shifted from Elena to the man standing at the back of the formation. Officer Calder. Calder's entire body had gone rigid. His shoulders were locked, his spine too straight, like a man bracing for impact. His jaw worked silently, grinding teeth against the pressure building inside him. His eyes darted to the exit, then to the warden, then to Elena. And when her gaze flicked toward him, just for a heartbeat, he looked away. Too fast. Too guilty. Ramirez noticed. So did the younger officer beside him. They exchanged a glance, unspoken but loaded with suspicion. The warden took a step forward, his voice measured. "Miss Stone, you said you recognized this person. Is that correct?" Elena hesitated. Her breath hitched. She looked at Lucas again, as if seeking permission, reassurance, strength. Lucas gave the smallest nod. "Yes," she whispered. "I recognized him." The room stilled. Even the whispers died. "Who was it?" the warden asked. Elena opened her mouth, but the words stuck. Fear clawed at her throat. The same fear that had kept her silent for a year. The fear of retaliation, of disbelief, of being labeled a liar or worse. But then she thought of Lucas sitting in a cell for a crime he didn't commit, counting down the hours to his execution. And the fear turned to something else. Anger. "I need to explain what I saw first," Elena said, her voice gaining strength. "I need you to understand." The warden nodded. "Go on." Elena closed her eyes, forcing herself back to that night. It was around 1:30 inches the morning. The diner was almost empty. Lucas had been sitting in his usual booth for over an hour. When he left, he went out the back door. He always did that. He didn't like being seen. She swallowed hard. A few minutes later, I heard shouting. Loud. Angry. I went to the window, near the kitchen that overlooks the alley. Her hands trembled as she gestured, as if she could still see it. There was a man on the ground. Lucas was standing near him, but he wasn't alone. There was someone else. Someone moving fast, running toward the far end of the alley. "Did you see his face?" Ramirez asked. "Not clearly. The lighting was bad. But I saw his build, his height, the way he moved." Elena's voice dropped. "And I saw what he was wearing. A dark jacket. Black boots. The kind—" She paused, glancing at the line of officers. "The kind you all wear." The guards shifted uneasily. A few glanced at each other. One muttered something under his breath. Calder's breathing quickened. His hand moved toward his belt, hovering near the grip of his baton. The warden's eyes narrowed. "You're saying the person you saw was dressed like a police officer?" "Not like one," Elena said quietly. "I think he was one." The room exploded into murmurs again. This time, the warden didn't silence them immediately. He let the chaos simmer for a moment, watching, assessing. Then he turned to Elena. "And you're saying you recognized this person?" Elena nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I didn't realize it right away. I wasn't sure at first, but the more I thought about it, the more I replayed that moment in my head." She looked up, meeting the warden's gaze directly. "I'd seen him before. He used to come into the diner with other officers. I remember his voice, the way he walked." "Who?" the warden pressed. Elena's gaze shifted toward Calder. Calder's face went pale, then red. His hands clenched into fists. "This is insane," he spat, his voice shaking with barely controlled fury. "She's lying. She's making this up to save him." "Am I?" Elena's voice was soft but razor sharp. "Then why do you look so scared?" "I'm not." Calder's voice cracked. "This is a setup. She's a plant. She's connected to him. I served him coffee," Elena shot back. "That's the extent of our connection." Lucas finally moved. He shifted forward, chains clinking, his eyes locked on Calder with an intensity that made several guards step closer. "You were there," Lucas said quietly. It wasn't a question. Calder whirled on him. "Shut up." "You were there," Lucas repeated, louder now. "That's why you've been so nervous. That's why you tried to discredit her the second she walked in." "I said shut up!" Calder's hand moved fully to his weapon now. "Calder!" Ramirez barked. "Stand down!" But Calder wasn't listening. His eyes were wild, cornered. He took a step back, hand still on his gun. Lucas rose to his feet despite the cuffs, chains rattling. Two guards immediately moved to restrain him, but the warden held up a hand. "Let him speak," the warden said. Lucas's voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "I didn't kill that man. I found him dying in the alley. I tried to help him. And when the police showed up, I stayed because I had nothing to hide." His eyes bore into Calder. "But you ran. You left him there to die. And you let me take the fall." Calder's face twisted. "You're a criminal. A killer. Everyone knows what you are." "Maybe," Lucas said quietly. "But I didn't kill him." Elena stepped forward, trembling but resolute. "The man I saw running that night." Her voice broke, but she pushed through. "It was you, Officer Calder." The room erupted. Guards surged forward, some moving toward Calder, others toward Lucas. The warden barked orders, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Restrain Officer Calder. Now." Calder's hand went to his gun. Don't! Ramirez shouted. But Calder wasn't drawing, he was frozen, his hand trembling on the grip, his face a mask of panic and rage. Elena stood in the center of it all, tears streaming down her face, her body shaking with the force of finally speaking the truth. Lucas watched her, and for the first time in a year, something close to hope flickered in his eyes. The truth was out, and there was no taking it back. The warden stepped forward, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Everyone, quiet! The room fell silent, but the tension remained thick, suffocating, electric. He turned to Elena, his expression unreadable. Miss Stone, I need you to be absolutely certain about what you're saying. You're accusing a law enforcement officer of murder and evidence tampering. Do you understand the gravity of that accusation? Elena nodded, her face pale but determined. I understand. And you're willing to testify. She's lying. Calder's voice erupted from the back of the room, loud and raw. He shoved past two officers, his face flushed with anger. This is complete bullshit. She's making this up. The warden turned slowly. Officer Calder. No. Calder jabbed a finger toward Elena. She's lying. She's under his influence. Look at her. She's terrified of him, not me. He probably threatened her, told her what to say. Elena flinched, but didn't back down. He never. Of course you'd defend him. Calder's voice cracked, rising with each word. You've been visiting him, haven't you? Sending letters? This whole thing is a setup to get him off death row. Ramirez frowned. Calder. Her record shows no contact with Perry since his arrest. Then she's been paid off. Calder was nearly shouting now. Someone from his crew got to her. This is exactly what they do. Find some innocent-looking woman to lie for them. The other guards exchanged uneasy glances. A few stepped back slightly, watching Calder with growing suspicion. The warden's voice was ice. Officer Calder, you need to calm down. Calm down. Calder laughed, but there was no humor in it. She walks in here on execution day with some convenient story that magically clears him, and I'm supposed to just accept it? No one's asking you to accept anything, the warden said evenly. But your reaction is. My reaction is appropriate. Calder's chest heaved. I've worked in this system for 8 years. I've seen criminals manipulate witnesses, fabricate evidence, exploit every loophole. And now this waitress shows up out of nowhere with a story that contradicts an entire investigation? Maybe that's because the investigation was wrong, Elena said quietly. Calder whirled on her. You don't know what you're talking about. I know what I saw. You saw nothing. The room was watching now, every guard, every officer, the warden, all of them focused on Calder's meltdown. And Lucas. Lucas sat perfectly still, his eyes locked on Calder with a calm that was almost unnerving. He wasn't angry. He wasn't defensive. He was simply watching, waiting, listening to a guilty man destroy himself. The warden stepped between Elena and Calder. Officer Calder, I'm going to ask you directly. Were you at the scene the night of the murder? I already told you, I responded after the arrest. That's not what I asked. The warden's tone sharpened. Were you at the scene before the arrest was made? A pause. Too long. Too heavy. No, Calder said finally, but his voice wavered. Then why? Ramirez interjected, pulling up his tablet. Does the dispatch log show your unit in the vicinity 30 minutes before the 911 call came in? Calder's face went white. I was on patrol. I wasn't at the scene. Funny, Ramirez continued, scrolling through the data. Because your GPS shows you stationary for 20 minutes, 3 blocks from the diner. I stopped for coffee. At 1:30 inches the morning? Yes. Which coffee shop? The warden asked calmly. Calder's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I don't remember. It was a year ago. You remember responding to the arrest? The warden said. But you don't remember where you bought coffee? Calder's jaw clenched. I don't have to justify my movements to you. Actually, the warden said. You do. Elena took a step forward, her voice trembling but resolute. I've kept quiet for a year because I was terrified. I didn't know if anyone would believe me. I didn't know if I'd end up dead for speaking. She looked directly at Calder. But I'm done being silent. I saw you. I know it was you. Calder's hands curled into fists. You're a liar. Am I? Elena's voice grew stronger. Then why are you so angry? Why are you trying so hard to discredit me before anyone's even investigated? Because you're wasting everyone's time. Or because you're scared, Lucas said quietly. Calder's head snapped toward him. What did you say? Lucas leaned back in his chair, chains clinking softly. His voice was low, measured, almost conversational. You're scared. You've been scared since the moment she walked into this room. I could see it in your eyes. You don't know anything. I know what a guilty man looks like. Lucas tilted his head slightly. I've seen plenty of them. And you, he paused, letting the words hang. You look terrified. Calder's breathing quickened. His hand drifted down, unconsciously, instinctively, toward the weapon holstered at his side. The guards saw it. Ramirez saw it. The warden saw it. Calder, Ramirez said slowly, his hand moving to his own weapon. Don't. Calder froze, his hand hovering inches from his gun. He looked around the room at the other officers, at the warden, at Elena, at Lucas, at the walls closing in. This is insane, he whispered. You're all insane. Step away from your weapon, the warden ordered. I haven't done anything. Then prove it. The warden's voice was steel. Cooperate with the investigation. Answer the questions. Let us verify your story. Calder's hand trembled. For a moment, it looked like he might comply. Then his fingers brushed the grip of his gun. 3 guards moved instantly, surrounding him, hands on their own weapons. Calder, hands up, Ramirez barked. I'm not, Calder's voice cracked. I'm not the bad guy here. He is. He pointed at Lucas. He's a criminal, a killer, and you're all falling for this performance. Hands up, slowly, reluctantly. Calder raised his hands, but his eyes burned with fury and desperation. Elena stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. She'd done it. She'd finally said the words she'd been too afraid to speak for a year. And now the man she'd accused was unraveling right in front of her. The warden stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. Officer Calder, you are hereby relieved of duty pending a full internal investigation. You will surrender your weapon and badge. If you resist, you will be placed under arrest. This is a mistake, Calder said, his voice shaking. You're making a huge mistake. Maybe. The warden's eyes were cold. But we're going to find out. 2 officers moved in, carefully removing Calder's weapon and badge. He didn't resist, not physically, but the rage in his eyes promised violence. As they escorted him toward the exit, Calder turned back one last time, his gaze locked on Elena. You have no idea what you've done, he said quietly. Elena's blood went cold. But before Calder could say more, Ramirez pulled him toward the door. Move. The heavy steel door slammed shut behind them, and the room exhaled. Lucas remained seated, watching Elena. She looked shattered, relieved, and terrified in equal measure. The warden approached her slowly. Miss Stone, I'm going to need you to give a full statement. Everything you remember from that night. Every detail. Elena nodded, wiping her eyes. Okay. The warden turned to Lucas. Mr. Perry, your execution is officially suspended, pending a full review of the case. Lucas closed his eyes, letting the words sink in. Not freedom, not yet, but a chance. And in a place where hope had been a foreign concept, that was enough. Elena stood in the center of the room, surrounded by armed guards, a disgraced officer being escorted away, and a man who'd spent a year on death row for a crime he didn't commit. And she realized the hardest part was still ahead. The warden gestured toward a chair. Miss Stone, please sit. Take your time. But Elena didn't sit. She turned, facing the room, facing all of them. The guards who'd been suspicious of her. The warden who'd allowed this meeting. Lucas, still in chains, watching her with quiet gratitude. Her voice came out steady, stronger than she expected. I need to say this clearly, so there's no confusion, no room for doubt. The warden nodded. Go ahead. Elena's hands stopped trembling. The fear that had lived in her chest for a year began to dissolve, replaced by something she hadn't felt in so long she barely recognized it. Conviction. She looked toward the door where Calder had been taken, then back to the room. It was you, Officer Calder. Her voice rang clear, echoing off the concrete walls. You were the man I saw running from that alley. For a split second, the world stopped. Then it exploded. The door burst open. Calder tore free from Ramirez's grip with a roar of rage, shoving the older officer backward into the wall. His face was twisted, feral, all pretense of control shattered. "You lying bitch!" he screamed, lunging toward Elena. Chaos erupted. Guards surged forward from every direction. Ramirez recovered, grabbing Calder's arm. The younger officer tackled him from the side. But Calder fought like a cornered animal, wild and desperate. "She's lying," he shouted, thrashing against the officers trying to restrain him. "She's a liar. He put her up to this. Lucas fucking paid her." 3 more guards piled on, forcing Calder to the ground. His shoulder slammed into the concrete, but he kept screaming, "You're all fools. He's playing you. He's a killer. A monster." Elena stumbled backward, heart pounding. One of the female guards stepped in front of her, shielding her. Lucas rose from his chair chains, rattling, but he didn't move toward the chaos. He simply stood, eyes closed, head bowed. Relief washed over his face. Then sorrow. Then something deeper, vindication, mixed with grief, for the year he'd lost. For the truth that had taken so long to surface. "I'll kill you," Calder screamed at Lucas, spittle flying. "You hear me? I'll fucking kill you." "Calder, stop!" Ramirez shouted, forcing Calder's face against the floor. But Calder twisted, eyes wild, finding Elena through the mass of bodies. "And you're dead! You hear me? You're fucking dead!" The warden's voice cut through like a whip. "Gag him! Now!" 2 officers produced a restraint cloth, wrapping it around Calder's mouth. His screams turned to muffled roars, his body still thrashing. The warden stepped forward, his face carved from stone. "Officer Calder, you are under arrest for threatening a witness, assaulting fellow officers, and suspicion of murder. You have the right to remain silent, though that ship has sailed." Calder's eyes bulged with rage, tears streaming down his face. Not tears of remorse, tears of fury, of a man watching his entire world collapse. "Get him out of here," the warden ordered. "Maximum security holding. No contact with anyone. No phone calls until a lawyer is present. Move." 6 guards dragged Calder toward the exit, his body still fighting, still writhing. As they pulled him through the doorway, his eyes locked on Lucas one last time. The hatred in that gaze was bottomless. Then he was gone. The steel door slammed shut. Silence crashed over the room like a wave. Elena's legs buckled. The female guard caught her, guiding her to a chair. Elena collapsed into it, her entire body shaking, adrenaline draining away and leaving her hollow. Ramirez straightened his uniform, breathing hard. Jesus Christ. The younger officer wiped blood from his split lip. "Is everyone okay?" Nods all around. Shaken, but okay. The warden surveyed the room, his expression grim. "Someone get medical in here. I want everyone checked out, and I want a full incident report on my desk within the hour." "Sir," Ramirez said. "What about Perry?" The warden turned slowly toward Lucas. Lucas still stood, hands cuffed in front of him, chains pooling at his feet. He looked like a man who'd just walked through fire and couldn't quite believe he'd survived. The warden approached him, studying his face. "Mr. Perry, based on what just transpired, I am officially freezing your case. The execution scheduled for today is canceled, indefinitely." Lucas's jaw tightened. He nodded once, not trusting his voice. "You'll be returned to general holding while we conduct a full investigation," the warden continued. "I'm assigning a protective detail. If Calder has allies, they won't get near you. Understood?" "Understood," Lucas said hoarsely. The warden glanced at Elena. "Miss Stone, you'll need to come with us to give a formal statement. We'll also arrange protection for you." Based on Calder's threats, I'm not taking any chances. Elena looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. I'll do whatever you need. The warden nodded. Good. Officer Martinez, escort Miss Stone to interview room 3. Make sure she's comfortable. Get her water, coffee, whatever she needs. Yes, sir. As the female guard Martinez helped Elena to her feet, Elena's eyes found Lucas across the room. They stared at each other. No words. No need for them. In that moment, everything passed between them. Gratitude. From Lucas, for her courage. Apology. From Elena, for waiting so long. Understanding. From both of them, that this was just the beginning. Elena's lips trembled into the smallest smile. I'm sorry it took me so long. Lucas shook his head slowly. You came when it mattered most. A guard stepped forward to lead Lucas away, but the warden held up a hand. Give them a moment. The guard stepped back. Elena moved closer, still flanked by Martinez, but allowed to approach. She stopped a few feet from Lucas, chains still between them. An entire year of silence finally broken. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now? Lucas's voice was rough with emotion. Now they investigate. They'll tear apart Calder's life. They'll retest evidence. They'll interview witnesses. He paused. And if we're lucky, if the truth is enough, I walk out of here. And if it's not? Lucas met her eyes. Then at least someone finally knows the truth. At least I don't die with everyone believing the lie. Elena's eyes filled with fresh tears. You're not going to die. I won't let you. You already saved my life, Lucas said softly. The rest is up to them. The warden cleared his throat gently. We need to move forward with the process. Elena nodded, stepping back. But she didn't break eye contact with Lucas. I'll testify, she said. Whatever they need. I'll tell them everything. I know you will. Martinez touched Elena's arm gently. Miss Stone. Elena let herself be guided toward the exit. But at the doorway, she turned back one last time. Lucas stood in the center of the room, surrounded by guards, still in chains. But something about him looked different now, freer. As the door closed between them, Lucas finally allowed himself to breathe. The truth was out. The walls were cracking, and for the first time in a year, he could see a sliver of light breaking through the darkness. Outside, in the corridor, Elena leaned against the cold concrete wall, legs shaking, heart pounding. Martinez stood nearby, giving her space but staying close. You did good in there. Real good. Elena wiped her eyes. I should have done it a year ago. Maybe. Martinez's voice was kind. But you did it when it counted. That's what matters. Elena nodded, though guilt still gnawed at her. Down the hall, she could hear Calder's muffled screaming echoing from the holding cells. The sound sent chills down her spine. But she'd done it. She'd spoken. And now, finally, the truth had a chance to win. The warden stood in the center of the visitation wing, surrounded by the wreckage of what had been a routine execution day. His face was carved from granite, but his eyes betrayed something deeper, anger at the system he'd served faithfully for 20 years, and disgust at how close they'd come to killing an innocent man. He pulled out his radio, his voice sharp and authoritative. Control, this is Warden Moss. Execution order for inmate Lucas Perry is officially suspended. Repeat, execution suspended immediately. Cancel all protocols. Notify the governor's office, the attorney general, and the state prosecutor. I want them here within the hour. Static crackled. Then a voice, confused. Sir, the execution is scheduled for 1,800 hours. That's less than... I'm aware of the timeline, Moss cut in. And I'm telling you it's not happening. Suspend it, now. Yes, sir. Suspending execution order. Moss lowered the radio and turned to the remaining guards. I want a full lockdown of this wing. No one in or out without my authorization. And someone get internal affairs on the phone. We have a situation. Down the corridor, Calder was still fighting. Even restrained, even gagged, he thrashed against the 6 officers, dragging him toward maximum security holding. His muffled screams echoed off the walls, raw and animalistic. Keep moving. Ramirez grunted, struggling to maintain his grip on Calder's arm. One of the younger guards, Thompson, stared at Calder with open disgust. I worked with him for 3 years. 3 years? And he was a murderer the whole time? We don't know that yet, Ramirez said, though his tone suggested he believed it completely. You saw him, Thompson shot back. The way he lost it. That's not an innocent man. Another guard, Carter, shook his head in disbelief. If this is true, if he really framed Perry, how many other cases has he touched? How many other people are sitting in cells because of him? The question hung heavy in the air. They reached the holding cell at the end of the corridor, a windowless concrete box designed for the most dangerous inmates. They shoved Calder inside, and he immediately spun, charging back toward the door. Ramirez slammed it shut. The lock engaged with a heavy clunk. Calder threw himself against the door, fists pounding, muffled screams vibrating through the steel. The guards stepped back, watching the door shake. Jesus, Thompson muttered. He's completely unhinged. Ramirez wiped sweat from his forehead. Post a guard. 2 guards. No one goes near him until IA and the lawyers arrive. You think he'll talk? Carter asked. He'll have to, Ramirez said grimly. The evidence will do the talking if he doesn't. Back in the visitation wing, Lucas was being prepared for transport back to his cell. 2 guards approached him, their expressions different from before. The contempt, the casual cruelty that death row inmates usually faced, it was gone, replaced by something uncomfortable. Hesitation. Perry, one of them said quietly, we're taking you back to holding. Different wing. Warden's orders. Lucas nodded, extending his wrists for the cuffs. The guard fastened them, but not as tightly as before. As they walked through the corridor, Lucas noticed the other guards watching him. Some looked away quickly, embarrassed. Others met his eyes with something that looked almost like sympathy. One guard, a grizzled veteran named Hayes, who'd always treated Lucas with cold indifference, spoke as Lucas passed. For what it's worth, Hayes said quietly, I hope they get this right. Lucas paused, then nodded once. Me too. They continued walking. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the sounds of the prison gates clanging, voices echoing. Boots on concrete felt different now, less like the countdown to death, more like the machinery of justice grinding slowly back into motion. When they reached his cell, the guards unlocked it. Lucas stepped inside, and the door closed behind him with its familiar metallic clang. But for the first time in a year, Lucas didn't feel the walls closing in. He sat on his cot, elbows on his knees, and allowed himself to feel something he'd locked away months ago. Hope. It was fragile, tentative, but it was there, and it was enough. Elena sat in interview room 3, a paper cup of coffee cooling in her hands. She hadn't taken a single sip. Martinez sat across from her, giving her space to process. Other officers moved in and out, preparing equipment for the formal statement, but they kept their distance, sensing Elena needed time. The adrenaline had finally drained away completely, leaving Elena hollow and exhausted. Her hands trembled, her vision blurred with tears she'd been holding back. And then, all at once, it broke. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed. Not quiet tears, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. A year's worth of fear, guilt, and silence pouring out in waves. Martinez moved around the table, sitting beside her. She didn't say anything, didn't offer platitudes or false comfort. She just sat there, a steady presence. When Elena finally caught her breath, she looked up, eyes red and swollen. I waited too long, she whispered. He's been in here for a year because I was too scared. You spoke when you could, Martinez said gently. That's what matters. Is it? Elena's voice cracked. What if they'd executed him before I found the courage? What if... But they didn't, Martinez interrupted. He's alive. The case is being reopened. You did that. Elena wiped her eyes. What happens now? Now you tell your story. Every detail. And we find the truth. Elena nodded slowly. The guilt was still there, heavy in her chest. But beneath it, something else was growing. Relief. She'd finally spoken. She'd finally done what she should have done a year ago. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. Within hours, the prison transformed into a crime scene. Investigators from internal affairs descended on the facility like a swarm. Evidence boxes were pulled from storage. Digital logs were analyzed. Every case Calder had touched in the past 5 years was flagged for review. In a conference room commandeered for the investigation, Detective Sarah Chen from the state attorney's office spread crime scene photos across the table. "This is the original evidence from the Perry case," she said, addressing Warden Moss and 2 IA investigators. "Fingerprints, blood samples, forensic reports." "What are we looking for?" one of the investigators asked. "Inconsistencies. Anything that suggests tampering." Chen pulled up a digital file on her laptop. "I've already found 3 red flags. The chain of custody has gaps. The forensic analysis was rushed, and the lead detective's notes mention a second set of prints at the scene that were never processed." Moss frowned. "Why weren't they processed?" "According to the file, they were deemed non-relevant." Chen's voice dripped with skepticism. "But there's no explanation for why. And guess who signed off on that determination?" She turned the file around. The signature at the bottom read, "Officer J. Calder." Moss's jaw tightened. "Son of a bitch." "It gets better," Chen continued. "I pulled Calder's duty logs from that night. He logged himself off duty at 11 p.m. But his GPS tracker, the one all patrol officers carry, shows him in the vicinity of the crime scene at 1:15 a.m., 30 minutes before the 911 call. He was there." One of the IA investigators breathed. "He was there," Chen confirmed. "And he lied about it." Moss stood, pacing. "What else do we have?" "I'm requesting the original forensic samples be retested," Chen said. "If those unidentified prints belong to Calder, this case is over. He's done." "How long for results?" 48 hours. Maybe less if I push." Moss nodded. "Push. I want this airtight. If we're wrong, we've destroyed a man's career. If we're right," he paused, the weight of it settling over him. "If we're right, we almost executed an innocent man." The room fell silent. Chen closed her laptop. "I'll have preliminary findings by tomorrow morning. In the meantime, I want Calder's financials, phone records, and a full audit of every case he's worked. If he did this once, he might have done it before." "You think there are others?" Moss asked. "I think," Chen said carefully, "that corrupt cops don't usually start with murder." That night, Lucas lay on his cot, staring at the ceiling. The usual sounds of death row were absent. No countdown, no final meal preparation, no chaplain making rounds. Just silence. And for the first time in a year, Lucas closed his eyes and slept without dreaming of the gallows. Day 3 of the investigation. Detective Sarah Chen stood in the forensic lab, watching as the technician pulled up the comparison on the monitor. 2 fingerprint samples, side by side, magnified to show every ridge and whorl. Left side, unidentified prints from the murder weapon found at the scene. Right side, Officer James Calder's prints, taken from his personnel file. The technician adjusted the overlay, and the 2 images merged perfectly. "It's a match," the technician said, his voice neutral but his eyes wide. 16 points of comparison. No question. Chen felt her stomach drop. Part of her had hoped they were wrong, that this was all a terrible misunderstanding. But the evidence didn't lie. "Print the report," she said quietly, "and send it to the DA immediately." The technician nodded, fingers already flying across the keyboard. Chen pulled out her phone and called Warden Moss. He answered on the first ring. "Tell me," he said. "It's him. The prints match. Calder's fingerprints are on the murder weapon." A long silence. Then, "Jesus Christ." "There's more," Chen continued. "We pulled his financials. 3 months before the murder, Calder deposited $15,000 cash into his account. No explanation, no documentation. And his phone records show repeated calls to known associates of the Volkov crime family, rivals to Perry's organization. He was working for them? Looks like it. We think they paid him to eliminate a witness who was going to testify against them. The victim, Marcus Hale, was scheduled to appear in court the following week. He was killed in that alley, and Calder made sure Perry took the fall. Moss's voice turned cold. What kind of debts are we talking about? Gambling. Calder had a problem. Underground poker games, sports betting. He was in deep with some dangerous people. The 15 grand was likely payment for the hit and a way to clear his debts. So he murdered a man, framed an innocent person, and almost got away with it. Until a waitress decided to speak up, Chen said softly. Interview room 3. Elena sat across from Chen and an assistant DA named Rivera. A camera recorded everything from the corner of the room. She'd been here for 3 hours, walking them through every detail of that night. The exact time Lucas left the diner, the sounds she heard, the figure she saw fleeing. And you're certain the man you saw matched Officer Calder's build and movements? Rivera asked, for the 3rd time. Yes, Elena said, her voice steady now. I know how he walks. I've seen him in the diner dozens of times. It was him. Chen leaned forward. Elena, I need you to understand something. Your testimony is the key to this entire case. Without you, we have forensic evidence, but no witness to place Calder at the scene. Are you prepared to testify in court? Elena met her eyes. I'm prepared. Calder's lawyers will come after you, Rivera warned. They'll try to discredit you, suggest you were paid off, claim you were in a relationship with Perry. It won't be easy. I don't care, Elena said quietly. I waited a year to do the right thing. I'm not backing down now. Chen nodded, respect in her eyes. Then we've got him. Interrogation room, maximum security. Calder sat hunched over the metal table, hands cuffed in front of him. His face was pale, unshaven, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. Across from him sat Chen and a federal investigator named Marcus Brooks. Between them lay a folder thick with evidence. Chen opened it slowly, deliberately. Officer Calder, we've completed our forensic analysis. Your fingerprints are on the murder weapon. Your GPS places you at the scene. Your financials show a cash deposit that coincides with the timeline. And we have a witness who saw you fleeing. Calder stared at the table, jaw clenched. You've been silent for 3 days, Chen continued. That's your right. But I'm here to tell you it's over. We have enough to charge you with first-degree murder, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. You're looking at life without parole. Minimum. Calder's hands trembled. Brooks leaned forward. But here's the thing, James. We know you didn't act alone. The Volkov family doesn't just hand out contracts to random cops. They had leverage on you. They knew about your debts. Calder's breathing quickened. If you cooperate, Brooks said, if you help us take down the people who put you in this position, the DA might be willing to negotiate. Not freedom, that ship has sailed. But maybe you avoid the needle. Maybe you get a chance at parole in 30 years, instead of dying in a cell. Silence. Chen placed a photo on the table. Marcus Hale's crime scene photo. This man had a family, a wife, 2 daughters. They've spent a year believing Lucas Perry killed him. You let an innocent man sit on death row while they mourned. Calder's face crumpled. Why? Chen's voice softened, just slightly. Why, Marcus Hale? Calder's lips trembled. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. They said if I didn't do it, they'd kill my sister. The room went still. The Volkovs, Calder continued, tears streaming down his face. I owed them money, a lot of money. They said they'd hurt her if I didn't pay. Then they offered me a way out. 15 grand to eliminate a witness. They knew Hale was going to testify. They needed him gone. So you killed him, Chen said flatly. Calder's voice broke. I didn't mean for it to go that way. I just wanted to scare him. But he fought back. And he covered his face with his cuffed hands. Oh God. Oh God. Brooks pulled out a recorder. Officer James Calder, are you confessing to the murder of Marcus Hale? A long, terrible silence. Then, yes. Lucas's cell day 7. Lucas sat on his cot, reading a letter from his lawyer. The legal jargon blurred together, but the key phrases stood out. Charges dismissed. Evidence of wrongful conviction. Immediate release, pending final administrative review. He read it 3 times, barely believing the words. 7 days ago, he'd been hours from execution. Now, he was reading about his freedom. He thought about Elena, the quiet waitress who'd risked everything to tell the truth. He thought about the year he'd lost, the darkness he'd lived through. And he thought about the life he'd led before all this, the choices that had brought him to that diner, the empire he'd built on fear and violence. He wasn't innocent, not in the larger sense, but he hadn't killed Marcus Hale, and somehow, against all odds, the truth had won. The cell door opened. Warden Moss stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 guards. His expression was unreadable. "Perry," he said, "walk with me." Lucas stood, confused but compliant. They led him through the corridors, not toward the visitation wing or the yard, but toward the administrative offices. Moss stopped in front of a set of double doors. He turned to face Lucas. "Mr. Perry, I've been a warden for 23 years. I've overseen 47 executions. Some of those men were guilty beyond doubt. Others," he paused, "others made me wonder. But I trusted the system. I believed in it." He opened the doors. Inside was a room Lucas had never seen, a processing center where inmates were released. Civilian clothes laid out on a table, discharge papers, a box containing his personal effects from the day he was arrested. "The state of California has officially dropped all charges against you," Moss said. "Based on new evidence, you have been declared factually innocent of the murder of Marcus Hale. Your conviction has been vacated. You are a free man." Lucas stared at the clothes, the papers. The open door beyond that led to the outside world. "I owe you an apology," Moss continued. "The system failed you. I failed you. We came within hours of executing an innocent man." Lucas's throat tightened. "You stopped it when it mattered." Moss extended his hand. "I hope you find peace, Mr. Perry, whatever that looks like for you." Lucas shook it, then turned toward the clothes on the table. His hands trembled as he reached for them. After a year in Orange, the simple jeans and white shirt felt like a costume from another life. But as he changed, as he signed the discharge papers, as he collected the box with his watch, his wallet, his keys to a life that no longer existed, one thought dominated his mind. Elena. He had to see her. He had to thank her. And maybe, just maybe, figure out what came next. The gate was smaller than Lucas remembered. 7 years ago, when he'd first walked through it in handcuffs, it had seemed massive, an iron monument to the end of his life as he knew it. Now, standing on the other side, about to leave, it was just a gate. Metal bars, a mechanical lock, a barrier between one world and another. Behind him, the processing officer handed him a manila envelope. "Your discharge papers, case documentation, and a voucher for transportation. There's also information about reintegration services, housing assistance, job placement, counseling." Lucas took the envelope but didn't open it. His eyes were fixed on the gate. "Mr. Perry?" the officer prompted. Lucas blinked, focusing. "Thank you." The officer nodded toward the control booth. A moment later, the gate buzzed. Metal groaned as it slowly rolled open. Sunlight poured through the widening gap. Lucas stood frozen, watching it open. Part of him still couldn't believe this was real, that he wasn't about to wake up on his cot, the execution countdown still ticking. "You're free to go," the officer said quietly. Lucas took a breath, his first truly free breath in a year, and stepped forward. The world beyond the gate was overwhelming. Colors seemed brighter, sounds sharper. The warmth of the sun on his face felt foreign, almost painful after so long under fluorescent lights. Lucas walked slowly, his legs unsteady, like he'd forgotten how to move without chains. The parking lot stretched out before him, mostly empty except for a few cars, a security booth, and beyond that, the open road. Freedom. It should have felt triumphant, liberating. Instead, it felt terrifying. Because freedom meant facing a world that had moved on without him. It meant figuring out who he was now. Not Lucas Perry, the Mafia boss. Not Lucas Perry, the condemned man. But just Lucas. He stopped at the edge of the lot, unsure where to go. His old life was gone. His empire had crumbled in his absence. The men who'd once followed him had either scattered or been absorbed by rival organizations. He had nothing. No home. No plan. Then he saw her. Elena stood beside a weathered Honda Civic, parked near the visitor's entrance. She wore jeans and a simple blue sweater, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. Her hands were clasped in front of her, knuckles white. She looked terrified. Lucas stopped, his heart lurching. Of all the things he'd imagined on the other side of that gate, Elena hadn't been one of them. She saw him and straightened, her entire body going rigid with nervous energy. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Lucas started walking toward her. Each step felt heavier than the last, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of everything unspoken between them. Gratitude, guilt, a connection neither of them fully understood. Elena watched him approach, her eyes glistening. She looked like she wanted to run toward him or away. Lucas couldn't tell. He stopped a few feet from her, close enough to see the exhaustion in her face, the shadows under her eyes that matched his own. "Elena," he said softly. Her name seemed to break something in her. Her composure cracked, tears spilling over. "I didn't know if you'd want to see me," she said, her voice shaking. "I didn't know if you'd blame me for waiting so long, or if—" "Why did you come?" Lucas interrupted gently. Elena wiped her eyes, struggling to find the words. "Because," she took a shaky breath, "because you were the only one who never treated me like I didn't matter." Lucas's chest tightened. "All those nights in the diner," Elena continued, "when I was invisible to everyone else, just the waitress, just background noise, you saw me. You asked how I was. You remembered my name. You treated me like I was—" her voice broke, "like I was worth something." Lucas closed his eyes, overwhelmed. "And I owed you the truth," Elena finished, her voice barely a whisper. "I owed you more than that. I owed you a year of your life back, and I can't give you that. But I could at least make sure you didn't die for something you didn't do." Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy with everything they'd been through. Lucas opened his eyes, and when he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "You saved my life. I almost cost you your life," Elena countered. "You were scared. That's human." "So were you," Elena said. "And you still stayed in that alley. You didn't run when the police came. You could have, but you didn't." Lucas looked down at his hands, hands that had built an empire, that had committed sins he'd never fully atoned for. "I've done a lot of things I'm not proud of, Elena. I'm not a good man." "Maybe not," Elena said quietly. "But you didn't deserve what happened to you." Lucas looked up at her, and something in his expression softened. "Neither did you. Carrying that secret for a year, that couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," Elena admitted. "But it's over now," Calder confessed. "He's going away for the rest of his life. And you're—" she gestured toward the open gate behind him. "You're free." Lucas glanced back at the prison, then at Elena. "Free," he repeated, testing the word. "I don't even know what that means anymore." Elena smiled through her tears. "I guess we'll have to figure it out." "We?" Elena hesitated, then nodded. If you want. I know you probably have plans. People to see. Things to—" "I have nothing," Lucas interrupted. "No home, no family, no plan." He paused, his voice dropping. "But I'd like to not be alone, at least for today." Elena's smile widened, relief flooding her face. "I can do that." They walked together toward her car, their steps slow, uncertain. Elena unlocked the passenger door, and Lucas slid into the seat. It felt strange sitting in a civilian vehicle, no chains, no guards. Just Elena, starting the engine, adjusting the mirrors. She glanced at him. "Where do you want to go?" Lucas looked out the windshield at the open road stretching into the distance. Endless possibilities, terrifying freedom. "I don't know," he admitted. "That's okay," Elena said gently. She shifted into drive. "We'll figure it out." As they pulled away from the prison, Lucas watched it shrink in the side mirror. The walls that had held him, the cell that had almost become his tomb. But he was leaving it behind. Not because he'd escaped, not because he'd fought his way out, But because someone, a quiet, scared waitress, had found the courage to speak, they drove in silence for a while, the hum of the engine and the rush of passing cars the only sounds. Finally, Lucas spoke. "What happens now?" Elena glanced at him. "What do you mean?" "With you. With your life. After everything that happened, the trial, the media, all of it, what do you do now?" Elena thought about it. "I don't know. I quit the diner. I couldn't stay there after everything. I've been thinking about going back to school. Maybe studying social work. Helping people who feel invisible. The way I did." Lucas nodded. "That sounds good. You'd be good at that. What about you?" Lucas let out a long breath. "I have no idea. My old life is gone. I can't go back to that, even if I wanted to. And I don't think I do. So you start over. Easier said than done." Elena smiled softly. "Most things are." She paused, then added, "But you don't have to do it alone. Not if you don't want to." Lucas turned to look at her, really look at her. This woman who had saved him not once, but twice. First, by treating him like a human being when the world saw only a monster. Second, by refusing to let him die for a crime he didn't commit. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything." Elena's eyes misted again, but she blinked the tears back. "You already thanked me." "I know," Lucas said, "but I'll probably keep doing it, because I don't know if I'll ever find the words that are enough." Elena reached over, and for just a moment, she placed her hand over his. "You don't have to. I already know." They drove into the late afternoon sun, two people bound together by truth, by courage, by a shared understanding that second chances are rare and precious. Behind them, the prison faded into the distance. Ahead, the road stretched open and uncertain. But for the first time in a year, Lucas Perry wasn't facing it alone. And for the first time in a year, Elena Stone wasn't carrying the weight of silence. They were free. Both of them. Not because justice had been swift or easy, but because when it mattered most, the truth had been spoken. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change everything. The end. Justice doesn't always arrive on time. Sometimes it comes in whispered confessions, in trembling hands that finally find courage, in the quiet loyalty of someone who refuses to let a lie become the final word. This is a story about second chances, not just for the man wrongly accused, but for the woman who found the strength to make things right. Because in the end, the truth doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be spoken.